Good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to start with two slides, although I admit I packed a lot into those two slides, just with a business update, and then we'll start to bring you up to speed on what we've done in the last year or so since you were last here. I think the end of May of 2016, we had our last session with you guys, or a lot of you. And we've also got some really nice content, hopefully for you today, including a number of demos, so stay tuned. So on the business update, just some really great milestones that Nimble's reached in the last 12 months. We have a net promoter score of 85, which is the highest in the storage industry. This is an industry where the traditional vendors have scores in the teens to low 20s. Probably more significant, we crossed over the 6 nines of measured availability metric across our install base. And when we say that, that's every version of our OS, every version of our hardware dating back to the original CS200s that were deployed in July 2010. So that's a measured number. You'll hear some details about how we got there and how we've been pushing the curve closer to that 100%, but that's a measured availability number. We were placed as in the leaders quadrant again by Gartner in the general purpose storage magic quadrant. That's the quadrant that tracks the largest amount of storage revenue. We're also the most visionary in that quadrant, which we're very proud of. And we've continued to grow our customer presence, country presence now in more than 50 countries globally. Customer count, in January, we jumped over the 10,000 mark to close our quarter at about 10,200, which has been record growth for a company shipping product now just on 6.5 years. And revenue, we had a fantastic Q4 to end a fantastic year that's taken us over $400 million in revenue, and that's an annual compound annual growth rate of 64% going back to 2013. So really some nice numbers coming out there. One thing we're really proud of, and if we go back to May when we last spoke to you, we had just launched our all-flash array, and I think that as much as we'd had our first month or two of success, the market and the jury was really out on whether Nimble could really make great traction with all-flash. And what I'm pleased to say is we're now on a $160 million run rate for that business in just on 12 months. It was within a week will be 12 months of shipping the product. We have turned our 100% hybrid revenue now into 39% of the array revenue comes from all-flash, so very rapid turnaround there. You'll see some interesting numbers here. More than 700 customers, more than half of them deploy our all-flash in what we call unified configurations. Unified being all-flash for some and hybrid for the other. The most common use case is all-flash for primary, hybrid for backup, DR, archival, some of the secondary workloads. That's been a really important use case for selling both together or deploying both together. And we've also got some interesting numbers there. More than half the customers that are buying our all-flash arrays are net new to Nimble. So we're not just selling into our installed base, more than half of them come to new customers. So that's all I'll say about the numbers and the business update. What I will say is a lot has changed in the last 12 months. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of a product level set for everyone in the room to go over what the new stuff is, but also looking around, there are some new faces here or people that have missed a year or two. And just to bring you all up to speed on our products and the differentiation, I'll do this quickly and then we'll start getting into the meat of the day today. So starting with our platform, the first key element is InfoSight Predictive Analytics. Rod Bagg and Dave Adamson are going to take you through that in more detail, bring you up to date on some of the newest features, some really cool stuff coming and have been released in the last 12 months. That's the first component. It predicts and prevents problems across the infrastructure stack. It's risen to become the #1 differentiating factor for why people buy Nimble Storage. The second piece, and we've had some naming changes in the last 12 months, and you'll see why, is the collection of what we sell, and we call it the Multicloud Flash Fabric. So I'll come back to that in just a moment, but it's really grown the portfolio fairly recently when we added our Nimble Cloud Volumes, or our first multi-cloud storage offering. Together we call our platform the Predictive Cloud Platform, and the benefits really simple: fast and reliable, which is really a key thing, obviously, in storage, radical simplicity, end-to-end, not just in the simplicity of the products themselves, but in some of what InfoSight delivers in terms of eliminating a lot of the normal manual interventions that take place in managing a storage infrastructure. And of course, Cloud Ready is our new piece, which comes in with Nimble Cloud Volumes. So I'm going to now just focus in a little bit on the Multicloud Flash Fabric and talk about what it's made up of and some of the key attributes. So really 3 key things. Our flash arrays, this is where we make most of our revenue. All Flash and Adaptive Flash, which is our name for our hybrid platform. They've been very successful, both in their own right, as leading generation of all Flash and hybrid. Okay, so I'll go over a few of the details. We have converged solutions as well, with Cisco Smart Stack, we call it, and Lenovo through their worldwide channel sells their Think Agile CX series. And then new, and you'll see a demo in a few minutes, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, Nimble Cloud Volumes, which is an enterprise-grade cloud storage service, block storage service for Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. Okay? So let me just touch on some of the elements, and starting with our all-flash arrays, just a quick recap. The 3 areas that we've really jumped to the top as reasons why people are buying our all-flash arrays over really anyone else's. The first is just the sheer performance and scalability. We actually scale beyond everyone else in terms of we combine both scale up and scale out, and I'll show you an example in a minute. We have very consistent performance with all our data services running, and recently we've introduced features like quality of service, both automatic quality of service, where we automatically start to curb any rogue workloads that are hogging too many resources. We also have explicit, what we call QoS limits, where you can explicitly set either bandwidth or IOPS on a workload to allow enough IOPS for the key workloads to run. We drive down the TCO operationally, and from an original CapEx perspective, drive a much lower footprint. We achieve a higher usable capacity. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then a really big one that's, I mentioned before about the number of unified customers buying both all flash and hybrid, is this idea of all flash for production, but when it comes to backup, DR, and archival, it doesn't always make sense to buy a second all flash array, because using our hybrids, you're getting near the same benefits as all flash, but at about 1/3 of the cost. On the resiliency front, we do an exceptionally good job. InfoSight's been a key driver towards that 6 nines plus measured availability, but so have things like our triple plus parity RAID and some of the other capabilities that we have, and I'll touch on them very, very briefly in a moment. So that's our all-flash arrays. The Nimble Cloud Volumes, as I said, we'll peel back and go into more and more detail as we go through, but this has been something that we announced last Monday on the 27th of Feb. It's been picked up really well because it is truly an industry first, and you'll see why. But essentially, it's taking what you get with standard native cloud block storage coming from the large cloud vendors, and we're doing some really interesting things to bring them up to being enterprise grade. What that does, however, is, and this has become something that's very quickly caught on by our customers, is it's made all of our on-premise infrastructure that we sell, our arrays and our converged infrastructure, it's made it cloud ready. And you'll see why in a moment, but the essence of it is we can natively replicate between our on-prem arrays and the cloud volumes that attach to EC2 instances or Azure virtual machines, and give you this easy on-ramp to the cloud or easy off-ramp to the cloud if needed. So lots of mobility there, but what it really does is it future-proofs you for at any time in the future deploying moving to the cloud even though you've purchased on-prem infrastructure.
Talk about what Nimble, what the architecture is like for Nimble's cloud platform. Is it just Nimble sticking their own hardware inside an Equinix data center with a direct connect to Azure and AWS?
So let me come back to that because you'll actually see it, which will cover a lot. But it's pretty cool. We've done some very clever things in getting to the point of being able to deliver it as a service. So I'll come back to that in just a couple of slides. But good question.
Or yes, but not quite.
So when I said Multicloud Flash Fabric, the key things, I've showed you what it's made up of, but the key thing is we have commonality across these elements. And the commonality is they're all flash optimized, very flexible scalability, unified data services irrespective of on-prem, in the cloud, converged infrastructure, whatever it is, and the idea of mobility. So being able to move data sets around between these elements really very effortlessly and non-disruptively. So going through a few of those attributes, Flash optimized is really the core of what we built originally with Nimble OS in our hybrid incarnation and have continued to extend it. But it starts with this notion of integrated data protection. So we still do an exceptionally good job of the way that we do our snapshots and our replication. We can support several 100,000 snapshots per array. We've taken it to a level beyond others. Very, very fine granularity of our snapshots and replication points. We've introduced with our all flash and then back into our hybrid last year, what we call triple plus parity RAID. It's orders of magnitude more resilient than anyone else's shipping flash RAID in that we can withstand the entire failure of 3 SSDs within a single RAID set, but we also have what's called an intra-drive or vertical parity against every individual SSD. So you can have partial or sector failures in every SSD, 3 entire removed SSDs from a single RAID group, and we'll continue serving data without losing anything.
Were you going to get somebody to talk geeky on that?
Yeah, we could. If there's time at the end, we're happy to come back. But it's pretty cool, and that's, by the way, uniform in our hybrid as well. And then this notion of 20% more capacity. So what I'm talking about is before we kick in with our inline variable block dedupe and compression, which has really now become a given with all flash, we actually squeeze 20% more usable capacity from the same SSDs that many of our competitors use. So that's been a really big thing. So we're saying you start with a raw capacity, you take off the overheads of over-provisioning, of parity, all our file system and everything, we end up with more usable capacity than other vendors that use exactly the same SSDs. Advanced endurance management, that's been core to what we started developing with our first hybrid product and how we wrote to Flash. And we massively evolved it as we released our all-flash arrays. But essentially what it allows us to do is use the cost-optimized forms of Flash, whatever they may be and wherever they're going in the future as we look out to new way, NVMe and 3D Crosspoint, and yet still drive a very, very long lifespan on those flash drives because of how we're handling garbage collection and endurance management. And at the top, this idea of always on data services, so snapshots, thin provisioning, dedupe, compression, and so on, encryption without impacting performance, even under very heavy workloads. So now, setting aside the flash optimized piece, you think about scalability, and in particular on our on-prem arrays, this notion of combining scale up and scale out. So we can take a single array, we can add shelves of SSDs to grow its capacity footprint, we can non-disruptively upgrade the controllers from any model to any other to grow its IOPS profile, and then we can linearly scale out, supporting over 8 petabytes of effective flash capacity and more than 1 million IOPS at sub-millisecond latency, managed as a single, or viewed and managed as a single pool of storage, spanning 4 arrays. So really easy capability. You could start with our smallest AF1000 and non-disruptively end up with a cluster of 4 AF9000s, just growing however you want in any order. Then mobility. So this has been something that's been inherent in the product since we introduced clustering, I would say 3 or 4 years ago. We've just extended it now to include the cloud with our Nimble Cloud Volume. So it's pretty cool. So think about a data center where you have really 3 environments: a primary data center with, in this case, the hybrids and all flash at the top, hybrids. A secondary data center, maybe with some hybrid flash, and then the public cloud, in this case, Amazon and Azure, the 2 that we're supporting, with Nimble Cloud Volumes. And then this idea that we have flexible application placement. So think about the icons along the top as being the data sets for the application. We can essentially place those applications and the type of storage and location that makes most sense at that time, and then we have mobility. So in simple terms, we can take a workload or workloads from primary and we can replicate them at about 1/3 of the cost from all flash to hybrid to our adaptive flash platform, preserving any type of number of snapshots on both primary and secondary, even if they're disparate. We can then take a workload that's running in production and we can replicate it natively to Nimble Cloud Volumes. So in this case, our Oracle data set, we replicate it to Nimble Cloud Volumes behind an EC2 instance. You can cloud burst for a while and then replicate back or delete the data set, whatever you might want to do. So that kind of mobility. And then the notion of multi-cloud mobility, where we can say there's an SAP test dev instance running in AWS, and we change the connectivity and we can point it at Microsoft Azure, and you can continue running with the same data sets without actually doing a migration, and or replicate it back on-prem. And then what I don't show is we can also seamlessly move within a cluster. So in this case, all flash and hybrid, we can seamlessly move workloads around without impacting the application. So lots of mobility there, which really just gives you this flexibility of managing something with common data services, all optimized for all flash, but then being able to move workloads around to the place that makes most sense or the type of storage that makes most sense. And then over time, as you introduce new technologies, the same ideas kick in.